Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. We are lucky to have a special presenter with us. His name is Brendan Halcomb. He is our Cruisetours Sales Manager here at Celebrity Cruises. And we're partnering today with the CruiseWeb to give you a fantastic webinar on Alaska Cruisetours. So we're going to kick it off. We'll spend about 30 minutes or so, and we'll have some time at the end for some questions. And let's get started. Hey, Brendan, how you doing today?
I'm doing great today, Kim. How you doing?
Awesome. We're so excited to learn more.
Well, thank you so much for the invite. It's so nice to be able to get out there and talk a little bit about Alaska, talk a little bit about cruise tours. As you know, I'm so excited to be able to talk about this product, and it's something that I've got a genuine passion for just from the years that I spent working in and with Alaska.
Awesome.
So let's go ahead and get started. And as I mentioned, yeah, I spent a lot of years working with and in Alaska. These are some photos from way back in the day. I first started cruising about 16 years ago now. I spent 11 years working on board. If I take all the contracts that I spent in Alaska, and a contract is just the 6 months that we were working on board at any given time, I would have spent about 4 solid years just cruising the southeastern coastline of Alaska. That's me back in the day in Glacier Bay. I think it was 2004, pretty girl on my arm. She's downstairs with the baby now, so that worked out pretty well. And then just recently on the right-hand side, this is me in Alaska last season in 2019. The last 5 years, I've been working with the interior of Alaska to create our cruise tours. And it's a experience that I sincerely believe that if we make the leap to explore Alaska by both land and sea, there'll be fabulous experiences. And that's really what we're going to be talking about today. I think a great place to get started is to recognize how big Alaska is, because I think intellectually we know it, Kim. I think everyone kind of considers Alaska hanging off the top of the continental U.S. They see it on the news. They know it's the largest U.S. state, but they don't understand how large it is compared to the lower 48. And when we contextualize that, we begin to see how big it really is. If you were to split Alaska in two, those two pieces would be the first and second largest U.S. state, with Texas coming in third. There's more coastline in Alaska than the East Coast, the West Coast, and the Gold Coast combined. And in many cases, some of those destinations on the coastline are a series of interconnected islands. You can only get to them by boat or by plane. So how do you see a destination? How do you experience a destination that's this big and that disconnected on the coastline? Well, the answer in many cases, and what we're going to talk about here today, is the opportunity to explore it by both coastline and interior on a Celebrity Cruises cruise tour. So this is the map of Alaska, and I think as we start to explore, and one starts to explore, how do I have the experiences that I want to have? I think a great way to start out is to bucket out what are the experiences that you want. Say, what are the experiences that you have to have, right? For you to have this amazing experience, to fly to the West Coast, to go into the interior, to be on the coastline, what are the experiences you got to have for this to be an amazing experience? Then maybe what are the experiences that you've heard about but aren't key? And then what are the things that you've heard about but just aren't for you? And I think as you begin to explore that, you'll see how they break out between the coastline of Alaska and the interior of Alaska. Now, this is a map of the southeastern coastline of Alaska that then stretches into the interior of Alaska. You can see Vancouver in Canada down there on the bottom right-hand side, and Seattle also. These are our embarkation, debarkation ports for our cruises to Alaska. Now, we've got 3 ships that are sailing to Alaska. We've got the Solstice that does Seattle round trip. We have the Eclipse that does a Vancouver round trip, and then we've got the Millennium that's what's called open jaw northbound, southbound itineraries. Now, all of them are going to do a variation of itinerary that stretches along the southeastern coastline of Alaska. So between Vancouver and Seattle, and you can see Seward on the northernmost point there, just north of the Kenai Fjords National Park. All of the ships are going to do a variation of itinerary along this coastline, and it is a fabulous coastline. You absolutely do not want to miss a cruise to Alaska. It is an incredible experience. The opportunities that you have along the way in order to, for example, experience the whale watching. Some of the finest whale watching experiences in the world are in Alaska. As the whales migrate down from Hawaii through the Pacific in the springtime to the feeding grounds of Alaska. It's so rare not to have amazing whale watching experiences on your excursions. And if you're very lucky, potentially you can even see bubble net feeding, where pods of humpback whales are using their blowholes to create nets to feed up the fish. Such a uniquely Alaskan experience. As you go to Skagway, something that I think highlights Alaska so beautifully is the blend of incredible scenery and interesting history. Alaska blends that beautifully in so many of the destinations along the way, highlighted in Skagway, where the Yukon and White Pass Rail follows the route that the miners took in the late 1800s to access the Yukon goldfields. An incredible history that's combined with this scenery that just takes your breath away, of peaks and valleys and rivers and mountaintops. As you go to Ketchikan, you have the opportunity to see Alaska from up top, which I think everybody should attempt to do at some point. Now, it doesn't have to be by plane. It doesn't have to be by helicopter. It can be from the top of a mountain that you utilize a cable car. You can take a hike, but seeing Alaska from up top is an experience. And as you fly on a float plane amongst the misty fjords, the 1,000-foot cliffs that are rising above you, the misty cliffs surrounded by the Tongass National Forest, it's an incredible wilderness experience. All of these opportunities exist along the coastline. But one of the things that I love to do, in as much as there's amazing shore excursion experiences day in, day out in the ports of Alaska, there's so many opportunities just to do something just that you want to do on your own. This is a hike that I used to take on the Mount Roberts Trail. Debark the ship, walk around the back of the cable car, and it's about an hour and a quarter to the top of the mountain. And as you get to the top, the foliage opens up and you can see right to the end of the Gastineau Channel. It is a beautiful, beautiful sight. A cruise to Alaska is an exceptional experience. And particularly the scenic airs of cruising is something that will take your breath away. Now, you may have heard of many glacial scenic airs of cruising along the southeastern coastline of Alaska. There are many. You may have heard of names like Hubbard Glacier or Glacier Bay or Tracy Arm Fjord. The scenic area of cruising that we visit as part of our northbound, southbound itineraries on the Millennium, and I'm going to explain why I'm talking about this one specifically now shortly, is Hubbard Glacier, which is the most dramatic of all the glacial scenic areas of cruising along the southeastern coastline of Alaska. And the specific reason is that where many glacial areas are receding, Hubbard Glacier is advancing to the tune of around 30 meters per day. And what that creates is the calving. This is when the cliffs of ice collapse from the glacier into the ocean, and it's dramatic and it's spectacular, and you get more of it at Hubbard Glacier, and it is incredible. And where you're sitting right here is Disenchantment Bay. And the captain spins the ship for everyone to have incredible views of the glacier, 7 miles wide, hundreds of feet above the ocean. A dedicated onboard naturalist is narrating the experience. It is an awesome day. All of these experiences are open to you along the southeastern coastline of Alaska. Now, again, I'm talking about the Millennium, talking about our open jaw sailings, and I'm going to tell you why in a second. But what's fabulous about our open jaw sailings is the Millennium was the first of our ships to be revolutionized. Now, what that means is that we are going through a process of upgrading some of our older ships. 2019, we spent $75 million taking the Millennium down to the studs and building her back up again. So exciting to be able to do a cruise tour on a ship that has a new feel, a new experience with so many of the amenities that are in our revolutionary Edge class of ships. Really cool to be able to do cruise tours, open jaw, northbound, southbound savings with a ship that has just been upgraded like the Millennium. Very, very cool experience. So why have I been talking about Millennium and Open Jaw and Hubbard Glacier that's associated with that itinerary? Well, this is why. Again, this is the coastline of Alaska. We've been traveling along this coastline from Vancouver to Ketchikan and Juneau and Skagway and Hubbard Glacier and going north to Seward. The opportunity in order to explore the interior of Alaska, and you can see the interior of Alaska north of Seward there, Alaska, Anchorage, Talkeetna, Denali, and Fairbanks. The opportunity to do that is created by embarking or debarking a ship in Seward. Now, because there are two other ships, the Solstice and the Eclipse, do round trip from Vancouver or Seattle. They do not dock in Seward, so there's not the Alaska from there. The only ship that we offer the opportunity to do that is Millennium, northbound from Vancouver to Seward or Seward down to Vancouver. Now, as you explore the interior of Alaska, so incredible. Seward, which sits on the Kenai Peninsula, glacial mountains that cascade down into the sea, takes your breath away. Alaska and Anchorage, Alaska surrounded by the 7 hanging glaciers and the Chugach mountain range, beautiful views. Anchorage, again, surrounded by the wilderness, the most populous city in the interior of Alaska, tremendous dining and drinking scenes, great opportunities in order to explore the coastal trails that stretch out into the Turnagain Arm. Talkeetna is a town that sits literally at the end of a road, nothing beyond it except the tallest peak in North America and Denali National Park. 6 million acres of pristine and wild and wonderful land. And Fairbanks, your gates to the Arctic and potentially the midnight sun as well. All of this is in the interior of Alaska. But remember what I said. It is the largest state in the U.S. by far. So when you're looking at these destinations, you're looking at multi-nights of travel to be able to experience them. If you were to travel directly from Seward to Denali National Park, it would be roughly a 9-hour drive. Now, we don't do that, but that's what it would be. So the opportunity to explore this interior of Alaska comes as part of a multi-night land tour. 2 to 6 nights in the interior of Alaska that then combined with that 7-night Alaska cruise on the Millennium creates the cruise tour. Overall, that experience is 9 to 13 nights. Now, you always have the opportunity to do one of two things. Either you can fly into Vancouver, do the 7-night northbound sailing that would take you up to Seward, then do a 2 to 6 night Celebrity Cruises land tour into the interior of Alaska, then flying home from Anchorage or Fairbanks, or alternately, you can fly into Anchorage or Fairbanks, do that 2 to 6 night land tour that would take you down to Seward, and then a 7-night southbound sailing that would take you down to Vancouver where you'd fly home from there. You always have the opportunity in order to do a northbound or a southbound sailing. One very cool itinerary that I want to highlight is to Homer, because we've added this brand new for 2021. I talked a little bit about the Kenai Peninsula there, and Seward. Seward sits on the Kenai Peninsula as well. It's known as the destinations where Alaskans go to play. It is fabulously beautiful. Now, Homer also, in addition to Seward, sits on the Kenai Peninsula, and what you're looking at here is the Homer Spit that stretches out into the bay. Just across the bay, you've got some fabulous that you have the opportunity to visit, but the beaches that stretch along there, the tremendous bars and the restaurants and the fabulous art galleries and the opportunities to explore, very, very cool in Homer, brand new for 2021. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Now, when talking about the coastline and the interior, it's really good to position up again when you bucketed out those experiences, as I talked about at the beginning of the presentation. What is the things that you must see? What are the things that you'd like to see? And what are the things that maybe you haven't heard about, or maybe the things that you've heard about but just aren't for you? And I think as you go through this process, it maybe enlightens a little bit why the combining the interior of Alaska with the coastline will create an elevated experience for you for Alaska. Because what's fabulous about a cruise tour is that the core of why you want to go to Alaska is really elevated as part of a cruise tour experience. I think once you start to explore, what you'll find is that what really drives the experiences that you want are a combination of wilderness and wildlife and mountains and glaciers. And what you'll find as you start to explore is that those tremendous opportunities for wilderness on the coastline. I talked about flying amongst the misty fjords and surrounded by the Tongass National Forest. It's a great wilderness experience for the afternoon on a shore excursion, but going into the interior of Alaska and Denali National Park, as we mentioned before, the 6 million acres of pristine and wild and wonderful land, and the Kenai Peninsula and the remote communities, it gives you the opportunities for wilderness day in, day out on the land component, surrounded by nothing but nature. The wilderness experiences you have in Alaska are elevated on a cruise tour over just the Alaska cruise. And when you think about wildlife, tremendous opportunities for wildlife on the coastline, we talked about them. But the opportunity to see Alaskans' big five, the moose, the caribou, the grizzlies, the Dall sheep, and the wolves, all of that in the interior of Alaska, the potential for it is in Denali National Park. Your wildlife experiences would be elevated as part of a cruise tour to Alaska. And when you think about the mountains and the mountain ranges, again, some of those coastal mountain ranges, the coastal range, the Kenai range that I spoke about, really spectacular. Your mountainous experiences would be elevated as part of a cruise tour of just the Alaska cruise. Now, those glaciers you get as part of any cruise only or cruise tour. But 3 out of the 4 reasons that in many cases drive folks to want to experience Alaska, that experience would be elevated as part of a cruise tour over just the Alaska cruise. All right, let's talk a little bit about celebrity cruises and why we're so proud of the experiences that we offer as part of the coastline in the interior of Alaska. Coastline, we talked a little bit about some of those shore excursions, and I'm sure you're familiar with the fabulous experience on board a Celebrity Cruises cruise ship. But as part of the land tour, really what elevates a Celebrity Cruises cruise tour from the industry standard is lodges, service, and transportation. So important because it drives the experience on the land component. We always utilize the finest lodges available, selected for culture, quality, and location. Now, what that means is that we start out with selecting the destination first. We want to take you to the destination where you're going to be able to have the best Alaskan experiences. We then select the finest lodge available in that destination. The key for us is the destination. We start with the experience. We drive with the experience. Now, a great example of that is we want to take you to Girdwood, because the Chugach mountain range and the 7 hanging glaciers and the opportunity for the optional land excursions are just incredible in Alyeska. And Hotel Alyeska is the finest property available in that destination. Now, it also happens to be the finest property in Alaska by some distance. Fabulous luxury resort with a 4 diamond-star restaurant that sits at the top of the mountains, heated saltwater swimming pools that look out over lush valleys. We want to take you to Girdwood, and Hotel Alyeska is the finest property available in that destination. Talkeetna also, top left-hand side, fabulous property. We would certainly cite it as the 2nd finest property in the interior of Alaska, but check out those views, top right-hand side. That is the back of Talkeetna Alaskan Lodge. The coastal range with Denali just towering above it. Beautiful views of Denali Mountain from Talkeetna Alaskan Lodge when the clouds rise, but also just 5 minutes away from the town of Talkeetna for those great local experiences. Actually, the only property in the interior of Alaska that combines both the ease of access to the town and those great mountainous views. Denali Park Village, bottom left-hand side, just 12 minutes from the gates of Denali National Park, sits right on the Nenana River, rushing by, fire pits on the outside, surrounded by the mountain ranges. Great property to have that national park experience. All very different properties, because we start with the destination and then select the finest property available in that destination but all very different, great properties for where they are. Also, for our cruise tours, it's a fully escorted experience. That's key. We really think it delivers amazing experiences in the interior of Alaska. Again, coming that conversation, big destination. How do you ensure that you see that you want to see, that you do what you want to do? Well, you have a local tour guide who is showing you Alaska through their eyes, who's getting to know you and understand what you want to see, and then making those great recommendations, whether it's a optional land excursion or citing the best local restaurant that's serving the freshest halibut at the beginning of the season. Every single Celebrity Cruises cruise tour is fully escorted by a local tour guide, someone who comes from Alaska or lives in Alaska but has that deep connection with Alaska. Additionally, there will be a dedicated motor coach driver for your deluxe dedicated motor coach. And the combination of those two people and the dedicated deluxe motor coach is what introduces you to the interior of Alaska and really elevates that experience for you. And then finally, luxury transportation. I talked about those deluxe motor coaches, but also rail travel, an absolute must when you're traveling to Alaska. Wilderness Express, we would certainly cite them as the finest available rail carriages in the interior of Alaska, 80 persons up top, luxury leather seating, of course those domed roofs for beautiful viewing in Alaska, but bar service available in the seats, a restaurant below with freshly prepared meals by a local chef with local ingredients available for purchase. Every single cruise tour that we have includes a rail segment on board the Wilderness Express, typically 3 to 5 hours. Now, some of our cruise tours have multiple rail segments. One of our cruise tours almost exclusively travels by rail in the interior of Alaska. So there's really a range of options there for you in order to select based on the rail experiences that you want. What elevates a Celebrity Cruises cruise tour above the industry standard? It is lodges, service, transportation, and the revolutionized Celebrity Millennium. Additionally, all of our cruise tours will have included experiences that are built into the cruise tour themselves. Think of these kind of like shore excursions, but are built into the cruise tour. Now, tremendous range of included experience. One of my favorites is the Riverboat Discovery, where you cruise along the Chena River with the Bentley family, who've been a family in Fairbanks since the founding of the town itself 100 years ago, visiting an Athabascan village, learning about their life in Alaska. It's very cool. But the one that you're probably familiar with is the tours into Denali National Park. Now, you may have heard about names such as the Tundra Wilderness Tour, the Denali Natural History Tour. There's only one road that goes into Denali National Park. It's 92 miles long. You're seeing it here. It goes down to a destination called Ketchikan. And the name just tells you how far down that road you're going to go. Tundra Wilderness Tour goes around 62 miles into the park, and Denali Natural History Tour goes around 30 miles into the park. Every single cruise tour we offer includes a fully guided experience with a national park ranger into Denali National Park. For those cruise tours where we have the shorter experience included, in most cases they can be upgraded to the longer tour into Denali National Park if that's something that you want. But a great addition to all the cruise tours that we have. 2021, great range of cruise tours. As I said, we start from 9 to 13 nights. I think this is a really good consideration because one of the challenges that we have at times is selecting a cruise tour because we have like 12 of them, and again, ranging from 9 to 13 nights. But what's great to recognize about our cruise tours is that when you look at the destinations that we go to, there's some replication as we go throughout the length of the cruise tour. On our 9 and 10 night cruise tours, you have the opportunity to visit Fairbanks, Denali, Talkeetna, and Anchorage. On our 11 night cruise tours, you have the opportunity to visit the same destinations, Fairbanks, Denali, Talkeetna, or Anchorage, now one more destination, Alaska. On our 12 night cruise tours, it's the same destination, but one more destination, Seward. And on our 13 night cruise tours, it's the same destination, but one more destination, Homer. It just stands to reason. The longer you're with us, the more opportunities we have to take you to places and to show you things. And yes, there are differences between the individual cruise tours, but what I encourage you to do is to consider the primary difference, which is time. And remember that Alaska is not Disney World. It is a cultural destination. The bears will be there if they want to, and they won't if they won't. And the clouds will rise from Denali, and if they don't, they don't. But the longer that you go to Alaska for, the more opportunities that you create for yourself for those magical, natural moments to happen. The longer you go to Alaska for, the more opportunities that you create for those magical, natural moments. Start out with how long you can commit to having an amazing vacation experience in Alaska, and then make your selections from there. All fabulous experiences, though, that we offer as part of our cruise tours. I'm going to finish out with a couple recommendations in around 2 minutes or so, because this is something that I see all the time. I go to Alaska a few times a year. This is not how to dress when you go to Alaska, Kim. I can't tell you how many times I see people dragging around these big coats and crampons like they're about to climb the Mount Everest. That's not Alaska. In the summertime, Alaska is beautiful. The flowers are blooming. Yes, you have intermittent showers, but it's not icy and deathly cold. It's just not what it is in the summertime. In the wintertime, yeah, but we don't go in the wintertime. We're cruising there in the summertime. This is the way to dress when you go to Alaska. This is Ken. Ken's not from Alaska. You can tell by his teeth. But he's dressed how you want to go when you're in Alaska. Gore-Tex, great material. Layering is really important. It can go from beautiful weather to some showers, back to beautiful weather to a little bit of cloud. It comes and goes. You really want to be able to take those layers on and off, just depending on the weather that you're experiencing. That weather will range. This is actually Anchorage that I'm utilizing an example. As I mentioned, it is a May through September season for us when we are cruising and offering cruise tours to Alaska. So you can see that your average there in May is around 54 degrees. You kind of jump up about 10 degrees into the height of the summer and then back down again as you get into the fall. This is the coastline. As you go into the interior, it gets warmer. So you can probably add about 5-6 degrees to this as you go into the interior of Alaska. You will see different things as you are exploring Alaska. And I think kind of one of the questions that I get the most is, when is the best time to go to Alaska? Well, there's no clear answer to that. It's just dependent on when you go, you'll see different things. So, or you'll see different things a little bit more. As you go in springtime, what's great is that the flowers are blooming.
I get a lot of questions all the time about people saying, when is the best time of year to go to Alaska?
Right, and you hear it all the time. And
yep. You're back, so this is good. Keep going.
Okay, so it's the flowers are blooming, and it's a great time to be there. Also, typically, what you'll see is that as the animals are starting to come out of hibernation, there's less foliage there for them to be able to hide, so that you can have some more opportunities to see a little bit of wildlife. As you get into summer, you have the fabulous summer solstice. Some of the longest days of the year will start in June. This is a great time shot of the sun just plopping down below the horizon and then jumping back up again. And very, very cool. Also in summer, the salmon start to spawn, starts with the silver salmon and then goes to the different types of salmon from there. Obviously, that attracts the bears, which is something that many folks want from an Alaskan experience. As you get into the fall, you have the full foliage. If you've ever been to Canada or New England and seen the great full foliage there, imagine 6 million acres of pristine and wild land turning burnt orange. Very, very cool. And also the aurora borealis, or summer solstice, not summer solstice, northern lights, as you may have heard. That happens typically around the middle of August, or certainly gets dark enough for you to see it around the latter part of August into the early part of September. What's key here is that you do a cruise tour that ends in Fairbanks on the final 2 cruise tours of the season, and that will create the opportunity. And again, like everything else in Alaska, it is an opportunity to see the Aurora Borealis. Also going to spend a couple additional nights there. All right, so that's it from me, Kim.
Awesome.
I hope I covered a lot of stuff there.
Yeah, fantastic. Absolutely. We're going to actually open it up for some questions. You know, certainly we're here hosting with CruiseWeb. And hey, just a little special note. Can you believe the CruiseWeb has been in business 25 years already? That's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. Absolutely. And we did put up the phone number on there on the page showing right now. So if you have any questions, of course, you can give them a call. I do see a couple questions that have come in. And one of the questions, Brendan, is how many people will actually be on my land tour?
That's a great question. So just going back to when I talked about the motor coach being dedicated to you and the folks that you're traveling with, typically speaking, it's around 42. So 42 persons will be on the motor coach. That motor coach will be dedicated to those 42 persons, as will the tour guide and the dedicated motor coach driver. So that will be your that will be the amount of folks that are traveling together. Now, what's interesting to note in addition to that is you're not with those folks all the time, right? There are parts of the day when you're traveling together or included experiences. That's when that group will be together. But then there's a lot of parts of the day where it's open time for you to do whatever it is that you want to do, whether that's an optional land excursion, going for a great meal, or whatever it is. So components of those days you'll be together with those 42 persons, and components of those days you will not.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, hey, that's all we have time for right now because we're just going over our 30-minute marker. But thanks, guys, for joining us. And thank you so much to Brendan and all this fabulous information that he's given us today. And if you have any questions, please give the CruiseWeb a call. And the phone number is right on your screen, 800-377-9383. And we look forward to seeing you in Alaska and real soon, next year. It'll be here before we know it. Now's the time to plan, guys. You want to make sure that you get those reservations in sooner than later. So have a great day, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks, y'all.